Alright, so this video is a little bit more spontaneous. I haven't really thought out specifically what I'm going to say in this video, but I've had a variety of ideas that have come up over the last few weeks, even more today, and it's revolving around the topic of repression, denial, judgment, shame, as well as how religion can play into that. Now, first, I want to say I do believe that there are places in the world where people practice certain religions, whether it's Christianity. That's the one that I see most in where I live, but also there's all sorts of religions that people practice. I do believe some of these religions, there are benefits for some people. I do believe that some people are able to find a sense of peace, and they're able to achieve certain things that they want. And they're able to get community and belonging and all those things. I do think, so from my experience, so on this channel that I've made and on the different talks that I've talked about, there's nothing here. Pretty much literally everything that I will talk about will be from my experiences. So it could be hearing, someone talk about something, and then I relate to it, and then I explain it in my own words and how I see it and how it's affected my life. And so this topic is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently with my background as being a pastor's kid. So, being a pastor's kid, you've grown up in this environment where it's very much so do as you're told, kind of authoritarian type figure. The churches are also doing the same thing. They're doing what you're supposed to be doing, exactly what you're told, getting put into a box to not step outside of that box. And if you start questioning and going against it, then red flags are raised, right? You get some attention. And then once that happens, it's going to ultimately lead to a place where you are the one who is wrong because you have sinned and you have done this thing that is bad. You've gone against the grain, you've questioned too much, you've thought this lie, you've thought this way of thinking, and you've done this thing and you stepped out of line. And ultimately, if that continues, it's going to be you have sinned. You need to ask for forgiveness. So that's one part of this. Another aspect of it is, so in life there is suffering. Life is suffering. In something like Buddhism, it is talked about, basically, I'm not super knowledgeable with Buddhism, but one of the basics of it is how suffering is a part of life. To live is to suffer. The human condition. It is about suffering. That is how it is. There's no way around it. So with that established, you can either accept that there is suffering and that there is a fundamental part of humanity, and living in the modern world especially, there are aspects of suffering. When it comes to the religious aspect of things, the reason if you stick with me in this video, I know it's taken me a second to get going, but if you stick with me, I think it's going to start making a bit of sense. If this is a new concept for you, but it's something that's making a lot of sense to me recently. So if you continue on that path and you're in the aspect of religion, and you're following a train of thought, and you got to do what you're told, and you're doing all that, just like I said, if you step out of line, you're going to ultimately start having a lot of eyes on you, a lot of questioning, a lot of get back in line. What does that lead to? Think about it. Very simple. Repression. You either go against it or you get in line. If you get in line, you will start repressing. And you may not even be doing it consciously. But if you're in one of these spots and you're in one of these environments that is very, very, very do what you're told type environments, aka Christianity, religion of all sorts. There are some religions, I'm sure, that are not like this. There are maybe some churches even. There could be some churches that are not this direct and this authoritarian type. But my experience, that is the case. I was a pastor's son. I have siblings. I grew up in that environment, and that is my honest experience. So, in those environments, the suppression is there. It's get in line. Then there are all sorts of things. I'm trying to come up with some things that I was thinking earlier, but how it goes from the suppression. And then when you suppress enough, you get to a phase of like deny. You're not doing any of this consciously, but it kind of leads to denial. And it's almost like what's happening around you, what you're seeing, things can be right in front of your face. And because you're part of your brain that is critical thinking, that is thinking outside of the box and being creative and doing all these things, the more you repress, you're literally cutting out parts of your brain. And you're you're turning off parts of your mind and your brain. And that is ultimately getting you on that path of following in line. And you are essentially in denial. Things are in front of you, and you're pretending that certain facts or events or certain things are not happening. And you're in this state of mind that is ultimately will lead to the denial, and it will lead to a variety of other things from there. One is judgment, shame, and guilt. Those are all self-explanatory, but when you start going from repressing, then you're denying that these things are happening. You're not questioning anything. You're just doing what you're told. Even if you don't agree with it, you're just disconnecting from your higher self is what you're doing. You're disconnecting. Essentially, you're turning off parts of your brain, disconnecting. And as you're doing this, it's just a combination of essentially mental, you could call it mental illness, you could call it mental health struggles, you could call it a variety of things. But if you are willingly turning off, it could be unconscious. If you're unconsciously just doing what you're told because of fear, which is instilled in you from the start in these religious, a lot of these religious groups or churches, or a lot of that is instilled to you at a young age. It is fear-based. So you're dealing with fear, with pressure. You start repressing. You don't want to be the black sheep. You don't want to go against the grain. You start doing that, then you start denying, and then you're not even seeing what's in front of you. You're refusing to question. Then as it goes from denial, you eventually start feeling no particular order, but you start experiencing things like judgment. Well, judgment is going on the whole time, but really it leads to shame and guilt. Shame because you get to a point where you're not trusting your instincts, and you're going against your higher self. And as you're doing this, and you're listening to these teachings that are saying you must do this, if you do not do this exact thing, you are bad, a sinner. So once you go against, if you do not go against that, and you just stay in line, you're ultimately going to get to this cycle of what I just said with repressing and denial and judgment and shame and judgment. And that is just going to go. There are other aspects of it, I'm sure, but from what I'm, understanding and what I've experienced myself with this and kind of being on the other side of it, I see how that cycle, and the way that you continue in it is by repressing your emotions, repressing your expression, repressing how you actually feel. That's the start. And then all these other things follow. And as they're following, it is leading to mental health completely just disconnected from reality with certain things. And then what happens from there? Triggered. People become very, it's this one size fits all, do as you're told. And when you go against that and you speak to these people about these things, it gets to be a very, very triggered environment, because they believe that this is the exact way. It's not just Christianity, there's other religions. And I actually am one that believes in the Bible. I believe it is useful. I believe it is beneficial. I believe in Jesus. I believe in all these things. However, not the way that it is done in the modern, in 2025, the way it is done. I do not agree with that. 100% do not agree with the way it is done in the masses. And you're essentially in these environments. I'm going to keep talking about just what's coming up on my mind, but how it eventually, I've talked about that cycle it goes through, and it's being you different phases at different times. But you're essentially, I mentioned this in a previous video, how you're essentially saying that God is, and everything that you need in this life it's out of you. You're asking for forgiveness. You're seeking salvation. Everything is external. When in reality, going internal is the real way to do this. This is not a religion. It is simply seeking things outside of ourselves for happiness, for pleasure, for joy. Yes, those things can be enjoyable and fun and all these things. But the ultimate way is going internal, whether it's through yoga, Buddhism practices, or tantric practices, or there's so many Eastern religions as well as other religions too, or not even religions. I think of them more as like philosophies, because they're not telling you what to do. They're giving you all these options, all these practices, and they're saying, basically, figure it out for yourself. For example, for meditation, they're not saying do this specific meditation, and if you don't do this, you're going to hell. There are all these meditations presented. There's mandalas and tritakas, which are more visual for meditation. There's meditation that is more powerful, and pranayama, which is breath work, which is just, moving energy throughout your body, moving it, to more parasympathetic calm states, or you're wanting to get more energized. You can do all these different things, manipulating your breath to achieve certain states. That's just, pranayama, that's another one. But there are all these practices. And the ultimate goal is self-mastery, self-realization, getting to a place where you were able to access these certain, whether it's the different chakras, and able to access these different states, operating more from the heart, operating more from this, operating more from crown or up here, being able to willingly do this. That is a lifelong journey. It is not something that is achieved overnight, 1 year, 2 year. It's a lifelong journey to do this. And I'm someone who is practicing these things way away from that self-realization aspect, but I see the path and I see how it unfolds. It is going against the grain in partaking in this kind of a path, because the easy way is to simply do as you're told, repent for your sins, not face anything directly. This is another aspect I wanted to talk about, how life is, like I mentioned, is about suffering. Suffering, you have to face the suffering to advance. Think about it like this. Painful thing happens. You either deal with it head on, or you repress it. There's only two options. You deal with it and you face it. You don't push it out of your consciousness and pretend that like you can do a lot of things with your mind, and a lot of them are terrible. I come from experience of doing this, pushing things that are in your mind and they come up and you feel this way, and then you pretend that it literally does not happen. You pretend, and you're essentially lying to yourself when you're doing something like that. When your painful thing happens, bad thing happens, instead of facing with it, sitting with the emotions, maybe it's breathing, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's talking about it, whether it's therapy or a friend, and you're feeling these feelings, you can either face it, talk about it, deal with it, or repress it. And repressing it, that ultimately leads to a life of doing that, leads to a very, very, very triggered individual, if I'm being honest. It leads to very, very, it leads to, I'll say it like this, it leads to rigidity. Very, very rigid. And it comes to, it also is inflating the ego, but it's not it's really not even in a good way. It's inflating the ego in terms of you just think that what you're doing is the way. And you're not even questioning things. You're just thinking that the way that I'm doing it is the right way. And if you question it, you are wrong. And here's why you are wrong. You see this in politics, right versus left, this versus this. No one's thinking. They're all reacting emotionally. It's triggered. It's being triggered. You're reacting emotionally. Now, how this ties into I talked about the denial and repression and religion and how it creates a certain kind of mind. If you are following this, it develops your mind a certain way. I will never say that my mental health issues I've talked about in other videos, social anxiety, depression, anxiety, generalized anxiety, OCD, all four of those things kind of looped in one. I will never say that, this was the cause. There were a lot of things that were causing it. It was a very, very long list. It wasn't one. It was more than 10, 20, 30 things that were causing it. And then it was a chain reaction of this was causing this, and then that caused this. So the social anxiety was causing more generalized anxiety, and then those combined were causing me to be depressed, and then that was causing this, and all these things were stacked on top of each other. Just like the different thought loops you can get in, you start thinking this way, and then another thing comes into it, and now you're thinking this and this way. I know that may sound crazy, but once you start getting these, you can get very, very ill in the mind. I know from experience. I was completely fucked up in the mind. Completely. I was on a script. I was doing what I was told, and I was being a good boy. On the appearance, I was. I really was not, though, because I was going against everything in my soul, everything deep down. I was going against it, and then creating a disconnect from my true nature. I was completely shutting off aspects of it just to fit in and hide and not stick out, not be too much. So this altogether, it's, I will talk more about this, and if something along this, in this video is resonating with you, definitely let me know. I don't really have a reason or a rhyme or reason for, making a certain video a lot of the times. I kind of just am thinking about something, and then I'm like, I want to talk about it. I don't really write things down or script things. At some point in videos, I'll move to doing that. But I'm simply just trying to get some thoughts out and seeing, if anyone's, resonating with this, and if it's making sense. If it does, definitely, drop a comment, like, subscribe. I'm gonna try to, start doing these videos more regularly. It's challenging with figuring out what to talk about, but I think the best way is to just go off the dome and speak what's on my mind, and just keep that stream of consciousness. And like I said, on a script, I used to be on a script, literally, where I was planning what I was going to say. I was, very, very, very rigid, super rigid. And there wasn't much free flowing of thoughts. which led to all these, no creativity, no free flow of thoughts, always, judging myself constantly, budging in, and not allowing those thoughts to flow freely. And even if it's a thought you disagree with, you don't like, you hate, you love, it doesn't matter. You can witness them and observe them when you get this free flowing of thoughts going. That rhyme. But yeah, so I nothing, nothing specific, but I just wanted to say kind of what I was thinking. And yeah, definitely let me know if this clicked with you. Peace.